What's up, Spider-Man fans? ANCHORPETE here, and I'm with my good friend, Brian, Mr. Coors Hair. Brian, you just saw Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes, a couple hours ago, and my eyes are probably still a little red. I don't know if you can see that, maybe?
Because you have some Spider-Man allergies? You're allergic
Yes,
to
I'm allergic to Spider-Man, and I definitely didn't. I mean, there definitely wasn't anybody cutting onions in there or anything, you know?
Yeah. Was your theater completely packed?
Yes, and this was the first time me being in a packed theater for in quite some time. But
Yeah.
I even said, like, I have a whole bunch of friends that have gotten tested positive lately, and they're all quarantining. And I'm like, any other movie at any other time, I might have been a little bit more cautious, but there was no way I couldn't go do this at this time. I had to.
So there's this, and then Morbius, right? You have to be at Morbius too.
Oh yeah, of course, I mean Morbius. Yeah.
Yes. Nah, dude, I totally understand. I went to go see it a couple of nights ago, and the theater was completely packed. I don't know about your theater, but like there were moments where it sounded like people like jumped up and like people screamed. At one point, and we'll talk about this in spoilers, but this woman just screamed out, "Oh fuck!" like that. I don't know, like maybe something was going on with her in the theater, but
this was one of my I don't typically remember all that many theater experiences, but this is absolutely one of the 4 that I remember. Because people were getting up and cheering and clapping. There were multiple times where everyone was clapping and hollering and all that. The other movies, if anybody even cares, were Freddy versus Jason.
Okay.
The whole theater was like screaming. It was incredible.
Yeah.
X-Men: The Last Stand.
What?
Only because at the part at the Golden Gate Bridge, someone yelled, "Verrazano Bridge." I just laughed my ass off at that. Okay. Verrazano Bridge being a bridge from Staten Island to Brooklyn. And then Endgame, because everyone was cheering at Endgame. So Marvel's done it twice.
Yeah. One of our good friends, Danny, said that his theater it reminded him of Endgame, going to see Endgame in the theater. But I would actually make the argument that this movie has more moments in it that are like those "oh shit" moments that Endgame had.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely make that argument.
Yeah. So for today, this is my plan. I was thinking that we could just talk about initially how we felt about the movie, jump right into spoilers, and then we could rank all of the Spider-Man movies and then rank all the MCU movies. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Good? Okay. So without spoiling the movie, can you just kind of sum up how you felt about it? I know it's hard to say without spoiling.
I loved every second of it. There were things that we expected to happen that were delivered on. There were a lot of there was something that I felt that most of all the Spider-Man movies, the MCU Spider-Man movies, or the appearances of the Tom Holland Spider-Man have kind of lacked something in terms of like whatever. I mean, it lacks something in terms of that street level Spider-Man kind of thing. And I think this one kind of hit that the most, even though there wasn't that much street level stuff. I don't know. There was something lacking that I thought the other Spider-Man movies had that this one had. And I really appreciated that. They hit on a lot of classic Spider-Man elements. And I just love this movie. I really love this movie.
Okay, well, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. If we're going to be talking non-spoilers at first, I think what you just said is totally true. There's so many things that we speculated. We had so many videos like this where we're like, oh, we think this is going to happen. We think this is going to happen. And you sit there and you worry about the way that it's going to be handled. Are there going to be certain cameos? Are they going to show up at the very last minute? Is it going to feel super convoluted? Is it going to not make sense? But in every way, it worked. It's kind of like Infinity War, where it's like you don't expect something like this to work as a movie with all these different story elements and trying to hit all these beats, but somehow in this movie they make it work.
Yeah, I think there's a lot with when you have so many characters in a movie, you kind of worry about servicing the characters enough to warrant their inclusion. And I think this movie just nails it. It absolutely nails it. Every person in this movie was in this movie for the right amount.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. This must be a special video because we have a comment We got Adit right here. I really think No Way Home is the best example of fan service being used for character development for Tom Holland than just being there. So
yeah, I can agree with that.
So what Adidas is basically saying that like the fan service like played into his character development. I don't get that. What does he mean?
I think he's saying that the fan service was a positive force on the development of the character.
Okay. In
I
that
hope
case,
I got that right. If I'm wrong, please correct me.
Okay, if that is the case, then I totally agree with him too. Like they really did that well. So many of these movies where they're just trying to like, oh look, see, we have this person, or we have this gadget, or we're gonna say that line. So much of it is just like shoehorned and awkward, but they made it serve the story. And I think the moment that they set this kind of those great moments, very well timed. I mean, I feel like we just need to kind of just jump into spoilers at this point because otherwise,
I can't wait any longer.
Okay. So let's just get to the first. Okay, before we get to the first oh shit moment, I want to talk about one thing I really liked before the movie really kicked into overdrive. Okay.
Of course.
So the movie starts off. They do the Marvel kind of opening crawl, and you hear like J. Jonah Jameson talking, and they're talking about Spider-Man being a menace. They show a little bit of Mysterio, and they cut like pretty much right at the end of Far From Home. And like at that, I'm like, oh crap, we have to go through all this like sort of backstory stuff with Peter, and like, can't we just get to the multiverse stuff? But I really love that opening sequence where they're playing like the song from like the 70s and they're just like swinging around the city. I really like that part a lot.
Yeah, I think I mean it absolutely picked up exactly where it left off. I'd be curious if that was even reshot or if it was, they filmed that at the end of Far From Home or not. I think it actually was newly filmed, but I was impressed with how quickly they got over it too. Like it was such a pivotal point of the movie for the setup of and the ultimate resolution of this movie, but it was over pretty quickly. Like worry that this is going to take over the movie, but it really doesn't. And then it did get us to that first oh shit moment.
Yes, and what I like too, because the oh shit moment's in between these two parts, but basically they made it to where like Peter realizes, oh man, I've really messed up the lives of the people close to me. And so I have to do something to change it. And when you watch the trailers, you kind of feel like, well, there's going to be this overall sense of just being invaded, their privacy being invaded. You're going to feel bad for them. But I thought it was really smart that they made it like, oh, they're not going to be able to get into college because of his connection, because they're connected to Spider-Man. And I think that like, that was a really good story beat. And then that pretty much like leads us right into that action moment with Doc Ock, but that's not the first oh shit moment.
No.
The first oh shit moment, Brian, were you like, because in the audience, they had to see him first, and then they went, ah! But like when you saw that cane go down,
yep,
you knew who that was, right?
Yeah, of course. Unmistakably, Charlie Cox as Daredevil is back. And I mean, we said this in our Hawkeye review earlier this week. How could they not do this? How could this not happen at the time when Kingpin just came back? It's so perfect. You couldn't make it more perfect.
Yes. This movie, in a lot of ways, reminds me of other times that they've sort of put special cameos into movies, like they had Star Trek Generations, right? Where like Picard meets Kirk, right? And then if you're a Doctor Who fan, they've always had these like crossovers between the different doctors and stuff. This movie's just chock full of moments like that, where it's like, oh my God, it's this person, and they're talking to each other. That's so fucking crazy. So you got Matt Murdock talking to Peter Parker and his little close circle. And I mean, honestly, do they really need that scene with Matt Murdock? Probably not. But it was fucking great.
You know what? I think it's a great way to cap off that, saying that this is going to blow over. This is not going to be a nagging legal issue. Like, you're not going to go to jail over this. I think that's possibly the best way to cap it off without dragging it off. You're putting this guy who is an excellent lawyer. I mean, he can catch bricks.
Yes.
And it was the perfect way to not drag it out, but give it enough weight to carry the story forward.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I give you that. Yeah. And when he caught the brick, absolutely. Just perfect. That was well set up too. Yeah. So Peter's not going to be a criminal, but he's still trying to get his life together. He goes to see Doctor Strange. What did you think of the whole Doctor Strange sequence in the Sanctum Sanctorum?
I thought it was really funny. I think this one might have been one of my favorite uses of a blip joke, where he said where Wong is now the Sorcerer Supreme on a technicality.
Oh yeah,
out of existence for 5 years. I never would have thought of that in a million years, but I for some reason really like that little note in that movie.
Yeah, and man, Juan really gets around, right? He was in Shang-Chi. He was in this.
Yeah. Was he? No. Was he in Eternals?
He wasn't in Eternals.
He wasn't in Eternals, no.
Yeah, but out of these Phase 4 movies, I think it's just Shang-Chi, Eternals, and this so far, right? For Phase 4?
Yeah.
And so he's in 2 out of the 3 Phase 4 movies so far.
And I guess maybe I'm thinking of his appearances in What If to round that out. But yeah, I really like that. I really like the idea that he's technically the Sorcerer Supreme, and that maybe that gives a little more weight to why Doctor Strange was a little more free flowing with this magic and doing this stuff.
Yeah, he was pretty chill. But I think that Peter won him over ultimately because he was trying to help his friends, right? And Doctor Strange was pretty humble about that. They showed these 2 people shoveling snow in there too, and one of them, I can't remember. There's a girl in one of the more recent Doctor Strange arcs that looks like the girl that was shoveling the snow, and I'm wondering if she's going to be in Multiverse of Madness too.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I know exactly what you're talking about. I just can't
remember her name, right?
Either, but yeah, that would be a nice little touch there too. And obviously, I mean, this is going real to the end here, but we saw quite a bit of what's next with Doctor Strange at the end, the very end of the second credit scene.
Yeah, and we're going to go into that in detail too.
Yes.
But what I liked about his spell, though, I like that his spell was, I'm going to essentially make everyone forget that you're Spider-Man. And then Peter does that whole thing of, you got to make Aunt May remember, and you got to make, Ned remember, and MJ, right? But I thought that what was going to happen was the spell was going to backfire, and there was just going to be this kind of crazy awkwardness. But I really like how they explain that the spell is essentially drawing all the people that know Peter Parker to them, that know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man to them.
Yes.
I thought that was a really good twist. I didn't pick that up from the trailer. I wasn't expecting that. And I think that's a very smart connection because Spider-Man is one of those heroes where so many of his villains know that he is Peter Parker.
Yes, and he is still one of the very few heroes that has a secret identity. Right. That's not a common thing, and as common as you would expect it to be these days.
No, especially in the
MCU. He might be the only one, actually.
Right. So that's a big part of this whole movie is him having his secret identity. But another part of this movie, I think what I really liked about this movie so much, which elevated it from just it's a bunch of cameos, we're just giving you everything you want. What really made this movie elevate this movie was it was what's important about this version of Peter Parker? What's so good about this version of Peter Parker? And this version of Peter Parker just wants to do the right thing. He wants to help people. And he's faced with people that we know as moviegoers and comic book fans. He's faced with truly dangerous people, and yet he still wants to help them. And I think, honestly, that's the best part of this whole movie.
Yeah, I think that was kind of alluding to something that was in the comics that Peter has a rule that no one dies. After a certain point, he says no one dies. He tries to save and help everyone, and I think that's a hallmark of this version of the character. And in this movie, completely does that. Yeah,
it just plays with the Uncle Ben theme, and it's so well wrapped in. And we're gonna get to that too, but there's just so much to talk about right now. Got another Adit comment. Me and my family watched No Way Home on opening day. My dad was more critical, but even he enjoyed it for what it did.
I mean, how could you not enjoy it? How could you not enjoy all those things? It's
yeah. I have to say that for me, a little cynical part of me was essentially they're giving us everything that we want. But I was able to tune that cynical side out because I'm they made sure they made a good story, though. They made sure that Peter has motivation, that it's a genuine thing. It's not he's just responding to stuff. It's he legitimately wants to reform these villains, and he pays a price for it, And I thought it was really well done.
Which shows the Parker luck, which is something,
Yeah.
one of those, what I mentioned earlier is kind of one of those things I feel was sort of lacking in the other MCU Spider-Man movies. They don't really show the Parker luck, which is, something always happens to put Peter down, but he perseveres and carries on through.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like, as comic book fans, we appreciate that. And then I feel like everyone at this point has seen pretty much all of these Spider-Man movies. It was kind of funny because when I was in the movie theater, I went by myself and it was a little awkward. I sat in the second row and I was with a bunch of strangers. There was like 3 women that were sitting right next to me, and they were kind of like sounded like housewives. And there was a little recap of all the Spider-Man movies at the Alamo Draft House before it played.
Oh, nice.
And they had like little commentary for each of the old Spider-Man movies. And I was like, that's awesome. So many people that you wouldn't even expect are fans just love this character so much.
I mean, the original Raimi trilogy is partially responsible for the superhero movie boom. It's not necessarily the first one, but it was the first hugest one. Like that was the first one to beat was the first Raimi Spider-Man movie.
Yes, and one thing I want to say before I forget, that Raimi Spider-Man movie has the Danny Elfman music. And Danny Elfman, when he does his job right in these superhero movies, makes incredible themes like the Spider-Man music, the Batman music for the first Batman movie and Batman Returns.
Yeah.
And then the Avengers theme, which is in all the Avengers films, right?
Yeah.
And I think like I've seen this video before where they talk about how these modern movies, these modern blockbusters don't have like noticeable themes. Whereas if you think of like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Jaws or Superman. I mean, those are all John Williams, but like the theme really stands out, right?
Absolutely.
What I was going to say was that these Spider-Man movies, actually, there is like a Spider-Man theme, and that doesn't stand out in all the MCU movies. And in this, the theme stood out. And what was so freaking awesome about this was that when you see all these different characters from the different movies, they would play their themes from the different movies.
Yeah.
So good. Like the Green Goblin's theme, Dr. Octopus's theme. So why don't we go ahead and let's just talk about every character that's brought in, starting with the villains. Okay?
Sure.
Which villain were you the happiest and most satisfied to see?
This is hard. Well, I'm going to answer 2 for this. I'm going to say one. I'm going to say Dr. Octopus first.
Okay.
And this is getting a little more to the end, but I liked that one of the things I was worried about in this movie was how were they going to have Dr. Octopus in this movie, because he sort of redeemed himself at the end of Spider-Man 2. And I think they nailed it. They just nailed it. They had him they had him off as a bad guy at first, but he does redeem himself, and he is not a bad character. He's not a villain in this movie necessarily. And I so greatly appreciated that. And I also felt very similar about Sandman, actually, because a lot of people think that Sandman can be completely cut out of Spider-Man 3 and it wouldn't make a difference. And I might agree with that on some levels, but I actually thought that was a really excellent part of that movie that I think is really underrated. And I was really happy that they kept him kind of more on the side of good. He wanted to go back to his daughter. That was his driving force in Spider-Man 3 was his daughter. So I'm glad they brought that up and they had him in the movie, and he wasn't. He does fight them at some point, but he didn't start off like that.
No. You bring up Sandman in Spider-Man 3. The sequence when he has just been in the collider and then he's just pieces of sand and he comes back. That's one of the best sequences in any Spider-Man movie. And in my personal belief, that's one of the best sequences in any superhero movie, where he's slowly building himself back up.
Yeah, that was great. And also that was like a crazy display of VFX of the time.
Right.
I think it still would look decent today by today's standards.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was kind of worried that for Sandman and Lizard, they were just going to be like CGI guys, and that's the way they were going to be throughout the whole movie. And I was happy at the very end, we saw Thomas Hayden Church, and I forget the British actor that plays Lizard, but what's that?
Rhys Ifans.
Rhys Ifans, thank you so much. I'm so glad you do this with me. Otherwise, the whole show would just be like that guy from,
the guy from the movie. He did the thing.
Right. So I'm really glad they showed them, though. But my question was, Did Kurt Connors have 2 arms when he transformed back, or do you have just 1?
I don't think they showed enough. I think we really just got upper torso. So I really couldn't tell, but I'm gonna assume that he only had the 1 arm.
1 arm. Okay.
Well,
okay,
they
cool.
probably didn't want to do the effects for it because he was in one shot, you know.
Right. So they just they're like, just turn this way, you know. So
Yeah.
His his arms on his back.
We're gonna get a real tight up here.
Right. So okay, so for me, I guess like the obvious thing would be like Green Goblin, because Green Goblin is one of my favorite Marvel villains. He's like my favorite Spider-Man villain. And I mean, Willem Dafoe is just incredible as an actor. But I would say this: I think they really upgraded Electro for this movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they very deservedly gave him a makeover. I think they even commented it in a jokey manner, but yeah, he starts off as the blue Electro, but you can already very quickly tell that he looks more normal. Like he was like a caricature in Amazing Spider-Man 2 before he transformed.
Right.
To the point where it felt very out of place with the much more serious and dour kind of setting in the Amazing Spider-Man movies.
Yeah. And there's just that awareness of that, like you were talking about. Like Jamie Foxx, obviously, it's kind of like a Ryan Reynolds thing where it's like he knows that people aren't really fans of that version of the character or that movie, but it's like they're kind of addressing it in subtle ways. And I like how he says the power is different here. Like in the MCU, it's different, and he wants to kind of upgrade himself. And you kind of feel like he has more confidence in himself than he did in that movie. And you don't know. I mean, you kind of ultimately think he's going to become a full-on villain towards the end when Peter's trying to change everyone back. But it's not just straight up, oh, he's biding his time and he's going to strike. You kind of see that conflict within him, and I really like that a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really like that there was a point in the movie when everyone was, even like with the villains, where everyone was working together. Like it was great. I mean, you knew the other shoe was going to fall, you know?
Right. You knew that Norman was going to betray them all.
Of course, it had to be Norman because he was there was no way the other side of him wasn't still around.
Right.
But I enjoyed seeing the kinder Norman Osborn before that. I mean, I still think that he was just incredible in that first Spider-Man movie, and really the only thing that lacked in that movie for me was his costume. His costume was kind of like laughable to me in a sense, and it has not aged well. But he is so good in that movie, and I think he continues that in this movie.
And they address that too in this movie, right? Because at one point, like Peter's talking, and they're like, "What about that guy that you fought?" And he's like, "He was like a green elf," right?
And you saw there's one point when they're doing searching for them on the computer. You see a picture of my smart speaker's going off because that's my wake word. You see someone is looking at the screen, and there's like a picture of a person with green face paint and ears.
Right.
Like that, they were looking up green elf on the computer. Again, to try and find him.
Yeah, but see, like that's the thing though. When they were using that device that Tony Stark had made, that thing that just essentially is like a replicator from Star Trek, it just makes anything, right?
Yeah.
I thought that maybe Norman would secretly be working on like a new upgraded costume. They had showed images of him flying around in the glider without a mask on. So I was like, okay, that's probably what he's going to be throughout the whole movie. But I mean, it would have been so cool if he had made like a cool Goblin mask that like looked like the comics, where it kind of like fit the contours of his face. I don't know.
Well, the clothes he's wearing in the Feast Center, which was also a nice comic callback. It was a green jacket and a purple shirt. So I feel like they were trying to do that, but that was as close as we're going to get. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't have criticism for this movie because I'm just so amazed at how well they just tied everything together. So I can't criticize it. So we're talking about the villains, and I think that's good. I wanted to talk about the heroes now, right? And then I'm just thinking, is there anything I want to say about the side characters too, or like MJ and Ned? I think that they were like good supporting characters for the most part. And I liked MJ the best in this. I actually haven't really liked MJ that much in these new Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, but
This turned me around.
Yeah,
Turned me around on it. Yeah, and they also had the little mention that her real last name is Watson, so it's MJ Watson. So I mean,
yeah, but it's like
maybe that helped. Maybe that helped solidify it for me. You know, I maybe in the back of my head I kept thinking that this is just a new iteration and or an interpretation, but no, it's MJ. That's the one. There's nobody else. That's it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Zendaya, the way that she played her in the first two movies is very like kind of cold and cynical. And, she's always making these kind of sarcastic jokes. And she does that a lot in this one too. But she's just a lot more kind of fun and has more purpose.
Yeah.
So, all right. Should we get to the big reveals?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So they have Doctor Strange's sling ring. So first off, I want to point out one thing, though. You and I have speculated about this movie for months at this point. Two things I just did not expect us to see at all. I did not expect the Sinister, like essentially almost like the Sinister Six and Peter Parker in an apartment working together. Did not expect that at all. The other thing was I did not think that Ned Leeds was going to have Doctor Strange's ring at one point doing magic.
I didn't think that either, but it was a crucial plot point, really.
Yes. So he's doing the magic, and they show a Spider-Man in an alleyway, and I grabbed the table because I'm like, that's going to be it. It's going to be that's either Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield. He comes through the portal. You start to kind of hear people go in the audience. They pulled off his fucking mask, and the audience just lost their shit, man.
Yeah, you could the first like fraction of a second, I thought it was just, Tom Holland, but once you saw the eyes, that's when you knew. And at that point, I was sitting with my son was next to the right of me, and then my wife was to the right of him. So I reach violently over my son. I'm like, it's happening. Tears running down my face. It's happening. Yeah, and that was just the first. I mean, it wasn't even the first time it happened during the movie. But yeah. That was like the pivotal moment. Like this is it. This is what they've given us everything. This is great.
Right.
It's all happening.
Right. Because we're sitting there worried that they're going to show up at the very end or something, that there's going to be a battle and they're going to just show up at the battle for like 2 seconds and then that's it. Right. But no, they show up right when Peter's at his lowest. It's essentially the second act has ended. They're the part of the third act. They usher in the third act. And they serve a purpose. Because we just gloss over the fact that Aunt May died, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say like that was a huge. That was a thing I wasn't expecting either, to be honest.
Yeah. When she was dying, did you grab over to your wife and be like, "It's happening! She's dying!
One more day.
She always dies."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, neither of us were. Neither of us expected it that at all. But one of the things that she called out, or she wished for this movie that was going to happen, this movie, is they were going to really hammer home with great power comes with great responsibility, which they have not really touched upon in these movies. And man, did they hit that hard.
Holy shit, yeah.
And I kind of felt it the second the glider came through. I'm like, there's no way. When she got up, I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way that she's gonna die. Like,
yes, yeah, because like Norman gets killed in the first movie by getting hit by the glider. I mean, yes, he's like stabbed by it and he's impaled against a wall. By the way, a guy on here, Sir John, is asking, "Are spoilers good?" Yes. Oh, we've seen Sir John with his little butt picture before too.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
We're deep into it here, so.
Oh, we're talking about Aunt May dying, man. So yeah, spoilers are welcome. But yeah, I thought that like you're right. It's like she just got hit by the glider. It looked pretty extreme when she got hit, and then she fell down. I was like, oh, okay, she's gonna die. And she did get to say that with great power comes great responsibility line. That was just like a really well done scene. This whole I feel like Far From Home didn't really have any great emotional beats, but Homecoming had that really great sequence where Peter was like under rubble and he was kind of giving up and then he got up.
Yeah.
This was like that too. It just reminded me of like, oh, they can go there with this sort of fun, awkward kind of Peter Parker. They can show like true emotion, true depressing stuff. And I thought that whole sequence was really well done, especially with him standing in the rain, looking at J. Jonah Jameson talking. That was like a Spider-Man comic right there. That was so well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and J.K. Simmons just knocking it out of the park with Spider-Man Menace shtick, which is classic in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's just incredible that you can get him. He's already established in the last movie, and you get him in this movie too. I mean, really, with the way that the story worked, you could have even got like Kirsten Dunst in there. You could have got what's her face? Gwen Stacy. I'm just trying to think of actress. Emma Stone.
Well, right, maybe. Oh yeah, I guess arguably you could have, but
yeah.
You know what? No, I don't think they could have done that, and I'm almost glad they didn't do that because I don't necessarily think that they would have added anything to the movie. And I think the and this is something that we predicted was going to happen on our trailer review. The scene where Zendaya MJ is falling, and it's the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man that saves her, redeeming himself for not properly saving his Gwen.
Right.
But I think that was so much more impactful than, and no offense to those actresses or anything, but story wise, that was the most impactful way of doing that. And I don't know, maybe that's like fridging, to an extreme, but it was a very satisfying redemption there.
Yeah, well, it's cool he brought the fridging. I want to address that. I just want to also address, because I like when people comment on our stuff. So John said, how come MJ not remember being swung by Spider-Man and pretty much liking him? Iron Man knew Spider-Man. So we'll get up to all the forgetting stuff towards the end of the discussion, Sir John, but I appreciate you commenting. What I was going to say, Brian, is you mentioned fridging. And then for people that might not know what fridging is, it's essentially when a female supporting character of a superhero, like a girlfriend or like an aunt or whatever, is killed for the sake of advancing the superhero story, to give the superhero some kind of emotional thing to respond to. And it's kind of funny because I do this one job where I go and I check into comic book stores. And I was talking to this guy who runs the store, Bat City Comic Professionals here in Austin. Really cool guy. His name's Matt. And he was saying that was like fridging for Aunt May. And I would have to say that like it kind of fits that criteria. But Aunt May is a character who has like died in the comics many times before,
which is such a funny thing to say. Like
right,
she's died a whole bunch of times before.
It's okay. That bitch has died many times. No. But let's say that Aunt May had been Uncle Ben, and Aunt May had been the one that had died. It was Uncle Ben that had raised Peter, and if he had died in that moment, same context, male or female, it's still serving that same story beat. Like. I don't think a gender thing matters in this point. It's just that it's like this person that is the closest to Peter died.
Yes, I agree with that. I think, I mean, I'm actually really curious if Uncle Ben even existed in this reality. I don't think they've ever mentioned him at all. And at the very end, the grave marker, it was a solo grave marker there. Like, I would imagine that she would have been buried next to her husband, but.
That's interesting.
So I think that fact alone kind of justifies the quote unquote fridging of this, because it's possibly the most iconic origin motivation of any superhero. The death of Uncle Ben, and them doing it with Aunt May gives it extra weight, because we've actually seen Aunt May in comics before. She's been a character that's been alive more than dead, and even though she has died times. So I think it was maybe it does fit that criteria, like you said, but I think it's justified.
Yeah. Well, it just works so well, and it just leads into that scene with Toby and Andrew Garfield, where I love the fact that like Toby, he wasn't wearing his Spider-Man outfit right away, and then they called him like a youth pastor or whatever, right? And so he's kind of hanging on to the building, and he's in that kind of clothing. And that reminded me of like certain Spider-Man comics. Like there was a guy that was like a mentor to Peter at one point in the comics. His name was Ezekiel, and he was kind of dressed casually like that, hanging onto walls. It kind of reminded me of that.
Excellent.
And it gave that kind of vibe of like, oh, this Toby could almost be like a mentor to the Tom Holland Spidey. But just the way they kind of complete each other's sentences, and they played the themes for the other Spider-Man movies, and you saw the actors kind of on their faces at least, react to their own Spider-Man movie history. Like, oh, Andrew Garfield lost his Gwen Stacy, and Peter Parker lost his Uncle Ben. I mean, they both lost their Uncle Bens, right?
Yeah.
So I just, that scene was probably one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah. Well, I think that scene was a little later because they were kind of comparing notes. And I think, both Peters helped the Tom Holland, in a kind of confident sense, and kind of saying, we've been through this too. We understand. And, I think they were equally as helpful, not just Toby. Andrew Garfield was just as much and influential in those scenes.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of at some point seemed like they were kind of playing up the Andrew Garfield one almost as like a comic relief, like he's kind of the more goofier one. But that's what's good about the Spider-Man character in general, and all three versions of Spider-Man, is that like he can be this kind of goofy, silly, awkward guy, kind of tripping over what he's doing, but then he can also be dead serious because his life can be dead serious, you know? And I think all three of them nail it. And then another just kind of fun, goofy sequence is when they're working on the cures for the villains.
Yes, when Ned says Peter, and they all look, and then they drag him, Peter Parker. Well, that's still all of us.
Right. And I really love how at the end they're like, okay, well, I'm Peter Parker, or I'm Peter 1, and they're Peter 2, Peter 3, right?
Yeah. And I love that they touched upon the organic webs.
Yes,
it was great. Like when the question they ask, how does it work? Does it come out of other places? Like
right.
Just not just enough, not too much, just the right amount of it.
Yeah. And you know what? There's also the fact that like Tom Holland mentioned he was on the Avengers, and then they're like, "What's the Avengers?" Remember that?
Yes,
I love that because it just shows like these are very different universes, and that's what's special about this Spider-Man. He's the one that's in the MCU with all these other heroes. I mean, there's so much shit to talk about in this movie. One other little side thing I loved is that what's his face? Tobey Maguire's like stretching out his back at one point, and he said, "Oh, my back," and like I don't know if you know this, but like a little bit of backstory for the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man.
Great pun.
Right. Well, there's that part where he falls in the movie. He's like, my back, right? In Amazing Spider-Man, or in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that in itself was an inside joke because Tobey Maguire was infamous for being kind of a jerk in the movies, and he had back injuries from the movies, and he kind of was trying to use it to get out of the role.
No, I thought he had an injury from another movie, and he almost didn't do it. And which they almost hired Jake Gyllenhaal.
Mysterio, right.
I don't remember him being a jerk necessarily. I don't read anything like that, but I mean, if maybe it's true.
He like apparently he's always been tough to work on in different movies and the Spider-Man movies. And at one point, Joe Manganiello, when he played Flash Thompson, some of the guys on the crew were going to give him money if when he was going to fight Peter, if he actually connected and hit Tobey Maguire.
Oh yeah, I did hear that once.
Right.
God, was that like a Mr. Sunday episode or something?
Well, it's been on Mr. Sunday. I've heard Joe Manganiello tell a story in other like interviews and stuff too. Yeah. But just the fact that like he has that one line where he's like leaning back and he's like, "Oh, my back, so perfect." Yeah. So I wanted to kind of just talk about the ending because I don't have much time left to talk, and I still want to do our rankings too. So. Sure. How do you feel about the end of this movie, the way it all gets resolved?
It was maybe a little MacGuffin-y, I think, because ultimately the resolution is a little foggy to me. But I feel like this was kind of a mix of One More Day and A Moment in Time from the comics. So One More Day was the deal with Mephisto to save Aunt May's life. And then A Moment in Time was when Doctor Strange actually made people forget that he was Peter Parker.
Yes.
So I feel like in a sense that they didn't bring Aunt May back, but there was more of a consequence to everyone forgetting Peter this time than I felt like there was in A Moment in Time.
Okay. I like that.
I like that. I feel like he was. This was the Parker luck thing, as I mentioned earlier, everything is going bad, and selfless Peter makes the sacrifice and the right choice, to solve everything at his own expense.
Yeah, and that is very much like comic book Peter Parker. We have another person that just joined our little chat. His name's Josh J. Josh, welcome. He said Peter mentioned Ben dying to Tony in Civil War. I kind of do remember that, where Tony's in his apartment and he mentions like, "Oh, I could have saved someone." He doesn't really outright say his uncle, I don't think, but he does say he could have saved someone and he didn't. And then he also says Jake probably could have been a good Spider-Man. Yeah. It was very good Mysterio, but yeah, it would have made a good Spider-Man. Right. I mean, I'm watching this whole movie, Brian, and I am thinking, wow, this is a lot like One More Day, which so many people hate.
Yeah.
But it's a big part of this whole plot. The way that it ended, where he was just by himself and no one remembered him, I like that. That's very heroic. It's just like the end of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, where he says to MJ, we can't be together, and he goes to be Spider-Man. I feel like that's, like you said, it's just like that's what Peter Parker is.
Yeah.
Right? At his own expense, if he saves others, he's going to, take the bullet, essentially.
Yes. Totally agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is great battle. I mean, the audience was losing their minds when the Spider-Man decided to work together and they all swung up on top of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like, absolutely. That was the equivalent of, Captain America and Iron Man and Thor meeting in the woods in Avengers, or all the people coming back in Endgame through the Doctor Strange portals. That was the equivalent of that for this movie. And I mean, if I had to at this moment pick between those three moments, I would pick this one.
Wow. Over Endgame?
I might. Wow.
I mean, Spider-Man's even in Endgame,
Yeah. Yes.
Oh man, I don't know.
Well, that was the most emotional beat of that scene in Endgame, was when Spider-Man came back, honestly, because his death was erase, whatever you want to call it, was the most impactful to me, because he was literally in Tony's arms saying, "I don't feel so good, I don't want to die." And then when he came back, that was the biggest emotional beat out of all of those.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I still would put maybe Endgame over, or that part of Endgame over.
Maybe I'm still riding a high here, and I'll come back in a week and be like, "What the hell was I thinking?"
Right. No, I mean, you just saw the movie like a couple hours ago, so
yes.
Well, the part where the woman went, "Oh fuck," in my theater was when not Andrew Garfield. Tom Holland went to go take the glider to kill Willem Dafoe, and then Tobey Maguire jumped up and caught it, but then Willem Dafoe stabbed him in the back. The woman went, "Oh fuck," and I think it's because she thought that he was gonna die.
I thought they were going there too for a second, and I'm glad they didn't, but yeah, I definitely had the thought.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm glad that he didn't die, and I'm cool with the way that Tom Holland resolved everything by, essentially becoming like no one even knows he existed. I really like that he ran into Happy at the end. I kind of almost forgot about Happy completely at the funeral, or not the funeral, but at the graveside. I was like, oh yeah, we haven't seen what happened to Happy since that apartment fight.
Yeah.
And it was just this really great way, because Happy starts talking about Tony next to Peter, and it's just this great way to kind of tie it all together, because it's like Tony was such a big part of Peter's life.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a good resolution. So with that being said, is there anything else you want to talk about this movie before we go into our rankings?
Do we want to touch upon the end credit scenes?
Yeah.
Well, quick, we'll just. I want to say that the mid credit scene is probably the worst scene in the movie, because it's just a reminder that the Tom Hardy Venom to me is just a goofball, and it just doesn't fit and it's not right to me. I'm excited that we'll maybe see a different version of the symbiote or Venom in the future, and that it won't necessarily be tied to that version, because I was not a fan of those movies overall.
Yes. I like the idea, and I'm still going to stick with this idea, that they're going to use the Venoms the way they use the Inheritors in the Spider-Verse comics and the Venoms, like the symbiotes, they're going to use them like that. They're probably not going to do this, but it'd be really cool if like they're like a multiversal threat versus just like from another planet.
Well,
We'll
I
see.
think when we saw Venom and we saw that happen, we were assuming that that was something the symbiote did. But
Right.
I think it was clearly it was just that was the same time the spell was being cast, and that's why he was there. So I really do love your idea, but now that we know that it was him being there was just completely the actions of the spell going wrong. I think that's a lost cause, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's a lost cause. And I mean, especially like seeing that Morbius trailer before watching this movie, I'm like, oh, we got to sit through this again. Great.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say was it's probably not going to mean anything. And it's just fan service. But that spell brought in people that knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So somehow the Venom symbiote at least knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, you know? Yeah. So whatever. That doesn't matter. What matters is who's in Multiverse of Madness at the end.
Yes.
You're not excited about that?
Oh yeah, of course. Yes. I mean, it was weird because it's essentially a trailer for another movie, but they didn't really show what happened with Doctor Strange after the real spell was cast, and right. It's nice to know what we're getting to next.
Yes, but I mean, I love that they showed Wanda. And what I was really excited about, though, was that they had that Doctor Strange that's from that What If episode.
Yes. Oh, my God. I got to forget. Yes, they have the evil Doctor Strange. We saw a couple shots of America Chavez. Baron Mordo was there. And was there anybody else that I'm forgetting?
According to Mr.
Shuma Gorath.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Shuma Gorath was in it, too. Yes. So, what I was going to say was, just before we go into our rankings too, if this is your first time watching the channel because of what we're talking about, make sure that you like and subscribe. We could definitely use some more subscribers on this channel. Brian and I love talking about comics. We actually love that you guys are, giving us comments right now too. I'm going to address a couple of them in a minute too. But we talk about comic book TV shows, and we've been covering Young Justice. We covered What If when it happened. We cover all the MCU shows. We're about to wrap up Hawkeye this week. So yeah, definitely if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so now. You can also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, we have a YouTube channel as well. There is Comic Books Transformed, the podcast, and there's Comic Books Transformed, the YouTube channel. Whichever way you want to be a part of this, just come join us. All right, I got that plug out of the way, man. Let's we're gonna do our Spider-Man movie rankings first, right?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. I'm very curious to see if our list is exactly the same. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go from least favorite to most favorite.
Okay.
There's 9 Spider-Man movies. By the way, Spider-Man has been in 11 movies since 2002, and that includes Infinity War, Endgame, and Civil War. And if you average that out, he's been in a movie every 1.5 years, Spider-Man.
Wow.
Right?
I'd love to see the box office return on movies that had Spider-Man in it.
Right. Crazy, right? So I'm going to go from least favorite to most favorite. Number 9. So this includes Spider-Verse. This includes the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, the Tobey Maguire movies, and the Tom Holland movies, but not
just the proper movies.
Right. Not like any of the Civil War. Guys, if you want to rank in the comments too, we'd love to hear what you guys think too. For number 9, Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Same.
Number 8, Spider-Man 3.
Same.
Number 7, Far From Home.
Same.
Number 6, Amazing Spider-Man. Number 5, Homecoming. Number 4, Spider-Man, the original one with Tobey Maguire. 3, No Way Home. 2, Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire. 1, Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay. Interesting.
So I heard you say a couple of names in there. What happened there?
So we started veering off after Far From Home. You went Amazing Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, Far From Home, and then it was what was after that for you?
So 6 was Amazing Spider-Man, the first.
Okay, I have Amazing Spider-Man at 5 and Homecoming at 6.
Oh shit! I thought you actually really liked the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies.
I really do, but I just really think that the Andrew Garfield movies are really underrated, especially that first one. That first one was a solid movie. It really hit up on a bunch of comic points that were not touched otherwise. Captain Stacy and all that. And I just think it's overlooked. Absolutely. Yeah. After that, I have Homecoming at 6, Amazing Spider-Man at 5. Then I have Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, and then I have No Way Home as the first one. I love it that much.
So Into the Spider-Verse we both have as number 1.
No, Into the Spider-Verse is 2 for me. No Way Home is 1. This movie I watched today, I'm ranking 1.
It's so good, but in a lot of ways, it's like the culmination of all of them, except for Into the Spider-Verse, which it kind of is a very similar movie too.
Yes, I think you can really draw a lot of parallels with the different Peters and the mentorship factor and all that. But ultimately, I don't know, like seeing the exact versions of other of the character we've seen before just added a little extra, punch to it, I think. And it's very possible I'll go back and I'll change this. It is a very emotional gut feeling for this. And like you mentioned before, I saw this movie 5 hours ago. Like, it's very fresh in my mind.
I know, dude. I wish that we could have done this live and we could have seen the movie together,
Oh yeah, we would have been holding hands and crying at the same time.
That's right. We both would have grabbed each. We would have hit your son in the head accidentally because we both would have been reaching. This is happening, All right, let's address some of the comments. Josh Shea said, "I never got into Peter's parents' super spy story or whatever it was, Andrew Garfield's movies. That is sort of a weird dimension that those movies had. That is kind of in the comics. In the Ultimate Comics, they have it where Peter Parker's dad is this inventor. He makes the Venom symbiote in the Ultimate Comics. In the Marvel Comics, he and his wife are SHIELD agents.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And I agree with that statement. That was one of the weaker points of the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy, especially the second movie was way too much cramming in there for that movie. And that was one of the things that I think they probably could have done away with, and it would have improved the movie overall.
Okay. Look at that, Josh. He agrees with you there. So for Sir John, he's got 9 Amazing Spider-Man 2, 8 Mysterios. That's Far From Home, right? 7 Spider-Man 3, 6 Amazing Spider-Man, 5 Vulture. So that's Homecoming. 4 No Way Home. 3 Spider-Man 2, right? No, 3 Spider-Man, 2 Spider-Man 2, number 1 Spider-Verse. Okay, so Spider-Verse, it seems like it's pretty much beloved by Spider-Man fans. He says Spider-Man PlayStation 4 is leaps beyond the rest. Brian, have you played that?
Yeah, that's an incredible game, and they do a fantastic job with Dr. Octopus's characterization in that game. It feels like a movie sometimes, honestly. The end battle in that game is so ridiculously amazing.
Really?
Yeah, it's a fantastic game, and I'm kicking myself because I actually haven't played the follow-up, the Miles Morales follow-up, which is not a complete game, but I really got to get on that.
Well, I want to do spoilers for my own Christmas. I don't think my wife is watching this, but I think that might be a gift I might be getting from her for Christmas. So
nice. Enjoy.
Yeah. All right. So we did our ranking. I know we're kind of making this fast. I only really had an hour to record this. But guys, if you want to jump on here too, Brian and I are going to rank our MCU movies. The reason why I kind of wanted to run through all of mine is because this movie made me radically change my rankings. So
interesting. Okay.
So I figure I'll just go from the bottom and I'll go to the top and I'll go real quick. I'm not going to explain things.
Yep.
But you can just kind of see what maybe has changed because Brian and I do this every time there's a Marvel movie. So
I have a Google Doc with all my rankings, so I remember them.
Right, and I think you are pretty familiar with mine too. My number 1 has changed, by the way. Okay, 27. There's 27 of these fucking things. Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor: The Dark World, Ant-Man, Spider-Man: Far From Home. That's 23. Iron Man 3, 22. Ant-Man and the Wasp. Then I have Doctor Strange at 20. Captain America: First Avenger at 19. Avengers: Age of Ultron at 18. Spider-Man: Homecoming 17. Then there's Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Thor, is at 13. 12 is Eternals. Then 11 is Captain America Civil War. And now we're finally at the top 10. Okay. So 10, Iron Man, the original Iron Man. 9, Captain America Winter Soldier. 8, Endgame. 7, Spider-Man No Way Home. 6, The Avengers. I think that movie just gets overlooked now because we're so used to everything, but like that was a game changer. 5, Thor Ragnarok. 4, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Everyone always disagrees with me on that. That was my number one pick, by the way, for a long time. 3, Black Panther. 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, the original one. Number 1, Infinity War.
Wow, you jumped the first Guardians of a bit too.
Yep.
Interesting.
I shifted it, man. I just like this movie because I always say this every time we talk about this, but it's like I judge how much I like a movie based on how excited I am to see each individual scene. And I just started watching Infinity War recently, and I was like, oh my God, this is so good on so many levels. And yeah, that's why it's my number 1. And I think that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, it's just I've kind of like lost as much affection for it as I've had. So you want to do yours?
Yeah, sure. Our with the exception of the bottom 3, ours differs quite a bit in some major ways. Number 27, the bottom. I'm not going to do numbers here. I'm just going to go, and when I get to 10, I'll start numbers again. Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, Thor Dark World, Doctor Strange, and I feel like I got to go rewatch that and reevaluate that. Captain Marvel, the first Iron Man, Black Panther, Thor, Ant-Man, Shang-Chi, Iron Man 3, Guardians of the Galaxy, Age of Ultron, Captain America First Avenger, Far From Home, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Black Widow, and then number 10 is Homecoming. And then we have Civil War, Guardians 2, Eternals, Avengers, Infinity War, Winter Soldier, Thor Ragnarok, Endgame, and No Way Home.
Holy shit!
I put a lot of weight into the emotional impact of these movies, and prior to this movie, that was Endgame. That whole third act was ridiculous. I mean, like, I don't know. 20 years ago, I would never say that I cried in the movie theater. Now it's like every other movie I see, I cry in the goddamn movie theater. I cried in Ghostbusters. I cried in Endgame. I cried in this. I don't care what anybody thinks anymore. It happened. Just when something affects me that much, I'm not an emotional person. I am like, normally stone faced. Like, you cannot get anything out of me.
Right.
But when something can hit me like that, I have to take notice of it. I had no problems with this movie. I loved every second of it. I am excited for what comes next. Probably more so than I've been in front of any of these other Spider-Man appearances outside maybe his first one. I'm excited for what next, and it's just like it's like a no-brainer to me. I struggled with when we reviewed Eternals. I really loved Eternals way more than I expected to be, and I didn't know where to put it. I know it didn't quite belong at the top, but I knew it was somewhere high up there for me because I had an emotional feeling from it, from the conflict in that movie. But this movie, hands down, it just does it for me on every level.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you say that because, like, there's certain movies that I think each of us have in our Marvel rankings, and I don't mean just you and me, but I think everyone, where people are going to, like, greatly disagree with us. They're going to be like, oh, you put that in your top 10? I wouldn't put that anywhere near it, right? Or, oh, you put that so low. Everyone has that. But I think that Endgame is pretty much universally loved because of the way it makes you feel, just like what you were saying. That end is such an amazing moment. And this movie, I think, is going to unite audiences the way that Endgame did. And Endgame, ironically, was like right before COVID. This is, COVID's still raging on, and who knows when it's going to end, but it does kind of feel like we've turned a corner on COVID. And so...
Oh, no, I don't think we have, because there's lots going on in my area here. So, yeah, there's a lot going on with COVID around here. And I was, like I said in the beginning of this review, if this was any other movie, I might have been too hesitant to go to the theater. Like, for example, The Matrix comes out in a couple days. I'm a huge Matrix fan. I defend even those sequels to anyone that will, shame them. And I mean, granted, we have HBO Max to watch it at home, but you know, I wouldn't go see it. I don't think. I think I might wait. But this,
Okay.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. There was too much riding on this.
Okay. Well, I live in Texas, and like everyone kind of treats like COVID as if it's not happening. So it just kind of feels like, oh, there is no COVID, like just
Yeah.
let's go see this movie together. And I've been going to the movies for a while now during COVID. I always wear my mask the entire time, but I'm pretty safe. If I hadn't seen Dune in the theater, I would have been upset. And then if I hadn't seen this in the theater, I would have been really upset. I'm going to see Matrix Resurrections in the theater too. But yeah,
I might still. I don't know.
Well, who knows? But if you guys do like and subscribe to our channel, whether it's the podcast or the YouTube channel, Brian, you and I got to talk about that then too, right? Matrix Resurrections.
I was just gonna ask you. That was my next question. Can we review that too? Because I mean, they made that in a comic book too.
Yeah. There actually was a couple of Matrix comics, believe it or not.
Yeah.
After the fact. But yeah. We could absolutely do that. But I actually have to get going. I got to go take care of my kids. But dude, I've had a real fun time talking to you about this.
Yeah.
This has been one of my favorite episodes doing this. So
yeah, and you can tell how I'm a little bit more amped than I maybe normally am, because I'm just a sucker for Spider-Man. Like, it's my favorite superhero. It always has been.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, he was around when we were kids. He like, I mean, obviously he was around when everyone's a kid, but like, he's kind of like your superhero gateway drug. I remember the very first comic I ever bought was Dark Hawk issue 3, I think. And it's because Spider-Man's on the cover going like this, and I thought it was a Spider-Man comic, right? Yeah. So, I think that, he's always in the parade on Thanksgiving. He is just a part of our lives. Yeah. And when Spider-Man's done right, it's like the best feeling. Go ahead.
I have to give one more anecdote that I almost forgot about. So, as I mentioned, I saw this with my wife and son. This was a 2.5-hour movie. I think one of the hallmarks of this being a great, amazing movie was the fact that it didn't feel like 2.5 hours. It blew by for me. And my son said that was a pretty short movie. Like, that's how you know that a movie was entertaining, is that when a 5-year-old, almost 6-year-old, can say that was short when we saw Ghostbusters like a week and a half ago, and it was only 2 hours, and he was bored out of his mind for half that movie.
Oh man, that's crazy. He liked it better than Aliens versus Predator Requiem?
I would say yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's awesome.
He asked me. He liked this movie so much. He's more of a symbiote Venom fan. He loves Venom and Carnage. He asked me to buy him Spider-Man, the Tom Holland Spider-Man, and MJ in Fortnite.
Oh, nice.
He never wants the female characters, so that means this movie had an impact on him.
That's cool. So you get the Zendaya MJ in Fortnite right now?
You can, yeah.
Did they have the Zendaya like Chani from Dune in Fortnite too?
They might have. They definitely had Dune. Yeah, it must have been, yes, because they had two. They had Timothée Chalamet, and it must have been the other one. Must have been her.
Okay. Dang, she's really getting it with the nerd cred right now, man. She's really. Seriously. Yeah. All right, well, I got to hit the road, but it's been a real blast. We hope to see you guys for our Matrix review, and also check in with us for our end review of Hawkeye and our continuing review of Young Justice. See you guys on Wednesday, 9:15